Imam Al Mahdi has made it haram, impermissible, that any individual support an illegitimate imam, an illegitimate kingdom or government, even with the stroke of a pen.
No.
Step one is the disbelief in the tyrants. All other rulers and all other forms of government other than that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen and made obligatory. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد إلى المهدينا وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear brother Abdul Kareem.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
Thank you for joining me. The honor's mine.
Thank you.
So, my brother, today we're going to talk about the situation that faces Imam Al Mahdi alayhi salam. On this channel, I think it's become clear to everybody that, we have a call that we're calling towards and a message. We spoke a lot on the channel and we will continue in the future too as well. Share gems of knowledge. And we've talked a lot about previous covenants, the previous prophets and messengers, and the trials and tribulations that they faced with the establishment of a divine just state. And that how that was the culmination of the efforts of all of the prophets and the messengers. We also said that Imam Al Mahdi alayhi salam is here, the 12th Imam, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. And that's what we want to focus our conversation on today. This idea that there are these narrations from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that said, if a person dies and doesn't know the Imam of their time, they'll die the death of ignorance. Mm-hmm. And in another narration, he states that whoever dies and doesn't have a pledge of allegiance in his neck, he'll die basically the death of ignorance, right? Yes. The death of ignorance means what? It means that it's the death of pre-Islam. What is pre-Islam? Idol worshipping, right? Yes. So anybody who doesn't, even if they were a monotheist, even if they declared that La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, there's no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger, even if they proclaimed that with their tongue, even if they prayed the 5 prayers, even if they fasted the month of Ramadan, even if they gave their yearly zakat and made their pilgrimage to the Kaaba, if they don't know the Imam of the time, and if they don't pledge allegiance to the Imam of the time, mm-hmm. then they will die as if they were an idol worshiper. So now there's this tie that's made. The Prophet ties the two concepts together. The idea of the worship of one God, monotheism, and the idea of there being an imam of the time that you have to pledge your allegiance to. Yeah. Well, what's a pledge of allegiance, AK? A pledge of allegiance is what?
A pledge of allegiance is where you basically is pledging the allegiance to the Imam of the time, or that individual that Allah has placed on the earth to go forth and proclaim His word to the people, and giving them this allegiance is like giving allegiance to God.
Exactly. But let's go back a few steps. Mm-hmm. What is a pledge of allegiance anyway? What is that? What's a bay'ah?
A bay'ah is like a testimony, or more or less, it's like an oath of allegiance.
Exactly. It's an oath.
Yeah.
And you see, by the way, even today in Saudi Arabia, for example, when King Salman, announced that Muhammad Ibn Salman, MBS, was going to be his successor, what did he demand? He demanded that, all the Saudis, they come forward and they pledge their allegiance, right? And then you had these scenes on the news where they were walking up and they were basically putting their hand into the hand of MBS, right, or his representative, and they were, making swearing allegiance, making an oath, making a promise, right, that they will serve him and that they're going to take him as their king. And so a pledge of allegiance is the same as an oath of allegiance. It's the same thing that a person does when he becomes a citizen of the United States, right? When he says, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, right? Or he becomes a citizen of any country on the earth. What happens? They pledge allegiance to the king of that country, right? Or to the constitution of the country, right? Or to the flag of that country, right? You're swearing your loyalty to them. You're swearing that you will serve them, serve that idea, serve that king, serve those laws, right? That you're going to be under that. That this is who you belong to. Your identity is that, right? So it's the same thing that also took place in the Middle Ages, when you'd have these knights or these people that would kind of bend the knee and they would, be in front of the king and they would swear an oath that they're going to serve that king forever. The same thing is taking place. And when a person votes in an election, right, even in democratic countries, you still have to swear an oath of allegiance to the flag. You still have to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution, and the Constitution dictates that the outcome of the election, the winner of the election that takes place will end up sitting, as the prime minister or as the president of that country, and therefore that president, that prime minister becomes your king. And so what the Prophet Muhammad is actually saying is that an individual who pledges allegiance to somebody, that pledge of allegiance can only be made to the Imam of the time. And so anybody who makes a pledge of allegiance to a tyrant or to a particular king or a particular ruler, no matter who they are, that person ends up being their Imam of the time. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. So whoever dies without a pledge of allegiance dies the death of ignorance. So according to God, you cannot go through life not choosing a guardian or not serving one king or another. And Imam Ali alayhi salam says in a very famous hadith, what means that basically, those who didn't pick a side between Ali ibn Abi Talib and his enemies, what?
It's like, if they didn't pick a side between Ali ibn Abi Talib and his enemies, it's basically they're not in the middle. They think that they're in the middle, but basically they're heading to the hellfire because they didn't pick a side. So they didn't went on the side of Ali ibn Abi Talib, knowing his enemies, so they were in the middle. So that's the part of shaitan, basically. Yeah.
So the hadith says basically that it's like those who didn't pick a side between Ali and his enemies, those who sat on the sidelines, they forsook, they basically let down all of Islam, and at the same time, they didn't benefit disbelief either. Yeah. So those who don't pick a side are even worse, really.
Yeah, they're worse then, because they didn't disbelieve, nor did they believe.
Yeah, exactly.
They were just sitting looking on the side.
Exactly. So you don't get to not pick a side. You have to pick a side.
Yeah.
Those who don't pick a side, those who die without a pledge of allegiance in their neck, die the death of ignorance. If you don't pick a side, then you're going to be resurrected on the Day of Judgment as if you were an idol worshiper. Yes. Right? You didn't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if you said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. All right? So it becomes of the utmost importance to find that divinely appointed king or that divinely appointed imam, and whoever you pledge allegiance to, that is going to determine, what side you are on.
Yeah.
The devil, as we saw in the Bible in the temptation, the scene of the temptation of Christ, the devil offers Jesus rulership over the entire world. He's also called in other places in the Bible the prince of this world, right? He's the guy who's in control. He's the guy who appoints all of the rulers, all of the leaders.
Yes.
Anybody that the people pledge allegiance to that God didn't appoint becomes a pledge of allegiance to somebody that the devil appointed, becomes a pledge of allegiance to the devil.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
There's only one choice, and that choice is God, through the person whom God appoints, the Imam of the time, who is bearing the Spirit of God. I hope that's clear for our viewers. Is that clear?
I think for most of them, it's very clear.
Okay, great. So then what happened? We had from the time of Adam all the way until the time of the 12th Imam, we had this situation where there was always an Imam of the time present. The narrations state very explicitly that if the earth is left without an Imam, a divinely appointed person whom you must pledge allegiance to, if he's not on the planet at any moment in time, the whole planet wouldn't exist. It would melt upon itself, right?
Yeah.
So God, what that means is that God would never create creation and leave them to be living in chaos without there being this beacon of light, without there being this lighthouse that's shining, this torch that's shining for those whom are seeking the way to find the way, right?
Yeah.
You have to have an Imam of the time. And the Imam has always been present and in the apparent amongst the people. Until the time of the 12th Imam, and then during the time of the 12th Imam, he went into this giant absence, this occultation. And the reason why he went into this occultation, right, and this is where Sunnis and Shia differ a little bit, right?
Discreetly.
In the identity of the Imam Al Mahdi. The Sunnis say what? They say, yeah, we believe that there's this guy that's going to come, he's the Mahdi, but, and they know that he's going to restore justice and whatnot, but they don't really, and you used to be a Sunni, right?
Yes, I used to.
So why don't you tell us then in your own tongue a little bit for the people, how did Sunnis understand this concept of there existing an Imam Mahdi that's going to come at some point, but at the same time, they don't believe that he's present now, but at the same time, there's these narrations, these Sunni narrations that state that if you don't pledge allegiance to the Imam of your time, you're going to die the death of ignorance?
In terms of if you don't find the Imam of your time, that you will die the death of ignorance, Jahiliyyah, they take this hadith as the Khalifa of the Muslims, for sure. But as for the Imam, the Imam of the time, they don't say it is an Imam of every time. It's every time there is a Khalifa on the throne of the Muslim, then you pledge your allegiance. So it's, for example, since the Ottoman Empire, the Sunni nation hasn't had the caliphate. So they said, okay, now we don't have a caliphate. Now this narration is not binding on us. This is how they look at it in this instance. Some of the Khawarij, for example, right? They look at this narration as every time, but they look at it as the one that is fighting jihad, or the one that is going out and calling towards Hakimiyatullah in their understanding of it. Yeah. And
so, for example, for them, who would it be?
Right now, at that time, this would have been for them Bin Laden, for Daesh, this would have been ISIS, this would have been Baghdadi, these individuals, for some of these groups. But the Messenger of Allah, he said in the narration, who doesn't pledge allegiance to the Imam of their time, meaning every time there will be an Imam. So it seems that, and it's clear that the understanding of this narration was indeed false, and it actually was not following the Imam of the time. So this is in this aspect of the Imam of the time, they have definitely gone astray in it. as for the aspect of Imam Al Mahdi and his coming and all these narrations that mention him, and in the aspect of Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari, they say he cannot be this Mahdi because he was born 100, 1,100, 200 years ago. Yeah? So he will not be this individual that the Shias believe in as the Imam of the time of Muhammad ibn Abdullah, as they say, the Sunnis.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Now you brought up a really important point that I want our viewers to kind of like pay attention to. So now the very existence of this hadith, that you have to pledge allegiance to the Imam of the time, you know, Sunnis and Shia, they have it, okay? Let's put Shia Islam aside for a moment. Let's focus on Sunni Islam. You're saying that the Sunnis basically state that any time there is a caliphate of the Muslims, automatically the Imam of the time becomes that the head of the state.
Yes.
Okay. So they understand the Imam of the time to be the king or the ruler of the Muslims.
Exactly.
That the authority of church and state, right, so to speak, or the religion and the rulership of the nation, they're one and the same. It's combined, and it's in the head of the state of the overall Muslims, right? Yes. It has to be one overall Muslims.
That's correct.
Good. So that means that for the Sunnis, the first Imam of their time after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have been Abu Bakr. And then after him, Umar.
Yes.
And then after him, Uthman. And then after him, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And then after him, Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, right? And then Yazid. And then, you know, it starts continuing on through all of the different Umayyad rulers, then the Abbasid rulers, and then the Ottoman Empire rulers. Yeah. Okay. But then after the Ottoman Empire, we have this problem where all of the nations, the Arab nations, were split up, right? The Ottoman Empire was cut up and divided, and there became Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, Libya, Syria, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Palestine, all these different nations, right, are set up. So then what happens now? Because now you have multiple leaders that are placed over every state. And now here's where the difference of opinion comes. So within the Sunni world, then, there became this thing where the governments would state that, okay, now it's obligatory for you to pledge allegiance to the ruler and to never go out against the ruler. So a group of Sunnis, they believe that it becomes their religious obligation to never protest, for example, against Hosni Mubarak.
Yes.
And I was in Egypt during the protests against Hosni Mubarak, and I was part of that whole toppling of and overthrow of Hosni Mubarak. Yeah. And I remember that on the television sets, the preachers at the mosques, everybody were yelling at the top of their lungs and trying to convince the people that it's an absolute act of disobedience and heresy, and it's haram, totally forbidden to go out on the ruler of the Muslims, whom they were saying is Hosni Mubarak. Yeah. Right? And then you have the other Muslims, and this is, I think, the more fascinating point that you managed to point out, that believe that no, these guys are illegitimate, they're tyrants. The only way, and they're actually fighting Islam, the only way that you can fulfill this narration is by pledging allegiance to the ruler of all of the Muslims. So they don't recognize individual state leaders. They want somebody that's going to unite and rule all of the Muslims.
Exactly.
Okay. And so this is where you get then the popping up of all of these terrorist organizations, right? Whether it's the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all of these the different African also terrorist organizations that have popped up.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because what? Because they believe, as you're stating, that they have a religious obligation to fulfill this narration.
Yes.
And they can only do so by
pledging allegiance to
the guy who's making it his life mission to reestablish a Muslim nation.
Yes.
And so therefore, the allegiance and loyalty of a lot of the Sunni Muslims will shift from being loyal to the state to being loyal to organizations such as the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, whose mission it is to establish an Islamic caliphate.
Yes.
All right. And that's why I guess these organizations end up being at odds, or these terrorist groups end up being at odds with the governments, the tyrannical governments of the states, because both of them are proclaiming and claiming to be the fulfillment of this narration. They're both saying we're the Imam of the time.
Yes.
Right?
Subhanallah.
Subhanallah. Yeah. There's other narrations, AK, that state that basically whoever pledges allegiance to somebody, that they're going to be resurrected on the day of judgment, as part of their group. So on the day of judgment, according to these narrations, every group is standing in front of God, and everybody's looking for the Imam of their time, so they go and they stand with him. So the people that pledged allegiance to Husn Mubarak, they go stand with Husn Mubarak, and Husn Mubarak kind of, takes them towards God. He leads his people over there. The people that pledge allegiance to Bin Laden, the same thing, Lanatullah alayhi. The people that pledge allegiance to Bashar al-Assad or to whoever it is, each group of people will go with their ruler.
Yes.
The people that pledge allegiance to Yazid will go with Yazid. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Then we have how Shia Muslims look at it. And Shia Muslims see the whole idea of this Imam of the time as being different. And they also agree with Sunnis that the Imam of the time has both powers, the powers to rule the nation and the religious authority, right? Mm-hmm. The keys to the heavens and the earth, that they are powers of church and state are combined in one individual. But they believe that these individuals are particular individuals that were pointed out and named by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they believe in 12 imams. Hence, the Shia are called 12ers, right? Yes. Because they believe in these 12 divinely appointed individuals or imams that were specifically named in narrations by the Prophet Muhammad and his family. And they go through, they're basically after the Prophet Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yeah. And so they believe that the first caliph of the Muslims, Abu Bakr, the second, Umar ibn Khattab, third, Uthman ibn Affan, that these guys were usurpers. Mm-hmm. They were imposters. They were not legitimate, and that they actually hurt and killed the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Fatima az-Zahra, 6 months after his passing. Okay. And they believe them to be the enemies of Islam. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so these three, you put them on the side, and then they believe in the legitimacy of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Mm-hmm. And then after him, 11 imams that were oppressed, meaning they were kicked out of the way. They were forbidden from taking their rights and rising to the seat of the rulership over the nation. Yeah. Right. So now for the Shia, for the Sunnis, the imam of the time is the actual physical ruler, no matter who he is. Exactly. For the Shia, it doesn't matter if he's physically ruling, actively ruling or not. It's the individuals that God chose, not whom the people choose, yes. Right? So God's choice still stands, and you have an obligation to find that individual and pledge allegiance to him, even if they're not actively ruling. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. And so then the obligation becomes twisted, it becomes reversed. Over here, even if the ruler is a tyrant, you have to remain obedient to them. Over here, if the imam of the time is not ruling, then you have an obligation to rebel against them. Yes. Yeah, because you only have an oath and allegiance to the imam of the time. And that's why you find in these Shia countries, right, such as Lebanon, you find that it's very easy for these groups such as Hezbollah to pop up, because Hezbollah is claiming to represent Imam Al Mahdi alayhi salam, right?
Yeah.
And so the people don't feel like they have allegiance that's binding to the Lebanese state.
Yeah.
They feel that they only owe Imam Al Mahdi their loyalty, and so they march behind those whom are claiming to be representing Imam Al Mahdi alayhi salam, right?
Definitely.
And so because Hassan Nasrallah is claiming that he's paving the way for Imam Al Mahdi, so then they pledge allegiance to Hassan Nasrallah, right? Or they march behind Hassan Nasrallah with this idea in their minds that their oath of allegiance is to the 12th Imam.
Yes.
And the same thing with Iran. This is how the leader of Iran, Khamenei, manages to remain in power, is because he has this kind of religious authority that he's holding over the heads of the Shia. That, like, guys, you guys have an obligation to pledge allegiance to the Imam of the time. This state is the state of Imam Al Mahdi alayhi salam, and I'm a representative of the Imam Al Mahdi alayhi salam, and so therefore you have to listen to me. You have to, because if you don't, then you're going to go to hellfire.
So as you brought up this point, after the occultation of Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari, and he went into this occultation. Through the years, through the centuries, you have seen individuals pop up in certain countries and claim to be his representatives in Iran, in Lebanon, in Iraq. The question I have is, after his occultation, what really happened, and who were these individuals? Not by name, but who are these individuals? Since these scholars are claiming to be his representatives today and now, and who gives allegiance to them, gives allegiance to him. What was left in between that time for the sincere believer that is seeking his Imam and seeking closest to Allah?
That's a really good question. And basically what happened is that, so the 11 Imams are oppressed. It gets down to the time of Imam Mahdi. He's born, Shia believes. His name is Muhammad, son of Al-Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. And he's forced to go into this occultation, this absence, right? Because the people are seeking to kill him now, just like they killed his ancestors, and they're especially wanting his blood, right? Why are they especially wanting his blood? Because he's the one that's prophesized, right? That's going to end their rulership, all right? So they really want to get the 12th Imam. And so the 12th Imam, in the history of the Shia, this individual disappears. He goes away. And then they claim that he had these representatives. Now, here's an interesting thing that happens, AK. And when we talk about what happened after the 12th Imam, it's really important to know this. So the 12th Imam, he disappears. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, there was this group of companions, these individuals, right? Four in particular, that were companions of the previous two Imams, the father of Imam Al Mahdi and the grandfather of Imam Al Mahdi, right? So some of the companions, a couple of the companions of those two Imams, Imam Al Hadi and Imam Al Hassan Al Askari alayhi salam, Ali Al Hadi and Al Hassan Al Askari, they and their successors end up going back and forth between the Shia, right, claiming to be representatives of Imam Al Mahdi. Yeah. And they brought forward letters, handwritten letters, as proof with directives from the 12th Imam, alleged directions and words of advice, things that the 12th Imam was wanting to inform them. Yeah. And the Shia would all obey these ambassadors, and it would be one ambassador at a time. And the ambassador would go back and forth. He would die. The next ambassador would fulfill the duty after that, and then the third, and then the fourth. And the Shia would obey these ambassadors, okay? The Shia would obey these ambassadors as their obedience to Imam Al Mahdi.
Yeah.
Then what happened is that the last one, he kind of brings this letter that says, after this ambassador dies, there's going to be no more ambassadors after him until the appearance of the Mahdi himself.
Yeah.
Okay? And anybody who claims to have seen him is a liar. Okay?
Yeah.
And so then this period of a greater occultation starts, the greater absence. So there's the lesser absence, and then there's a greater absence. The lesser absence, there's still communication that's taking place between the 12th Imam and the Shia, but from behind the 4 ambassadors. Okay? They're the ones that are communicating. The Shia are not seeing the 12th Imam directly. Then after this lesser occultation, the greater occultation takes place where there's no communication with the 12th Imam at all until the day that he appears himself. So how do these scholars then, during that time period of the greater occultation, claim? Because they can't claim during the lesser occultation because people have actual physical letters from the Imam, right? So how do they claim during the greater occultation that they have authority to preach and act on behalf of Imam Al Mahdi? Well, they go to a narration that states that al-ulama, the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So then they say, look, there's a hadith. It says that the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets, right? And they start pulling out these hadiths that are talking about the scholars and praising the scholars, and they abandon all the ones that are criticizing the scholars, and they claim then authority based on that.
Yes, they did. So that's, as you brought that point up, that's why the will is so important. Because it's not vague, it's so specific. And it's wording and who the following successor will be. As for what the scholars had, they just have a vague narration, very vague, that just mention the scholars are the inheritance of the prophets.
Exactly.
That's why it saves some misguidance.
It does. And so in our dawah, Abdul Karim, what we're claiming is as such. We're claiming that basically what happened is that the Prophet did appoint 12 successors, and that those 12 Imams are the ones that it was binding that the Muslims pledge allegiance to.
Yeah.
We believe that the 12th Imam, with the Shia, we believe everything that the Shia believe in terms of the legitimacy of the 12 Imams, the illegitimacy of the other rulers, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and the Bani Umayyah, the Bani Abbas, and the Ottoman Empire. And we believe, like them, that we are living in the time of the 12th Imam, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari. Now, here is where we differ. We differ because we believe that after the 12 Imams, there are 12 Mahdis. And you can find the names of the first 3 Mahdis in the will of the Prophet Muhammad, the same will that the 12 Shiyas believe in, that mentions the names of the 12 Imams. And we believe that we speak with authority, right? And we're claiming that we're speaking with authority because we are stating that 2 of the individuals that are mentioned in the will by name have come out and spoken to the people in their flesh and in their blood. And that is Ahmad al-Hassan, and there is Abdullah Hashim, Abu Sadiq, myself. Okay, that both of our names are mentioned in the will. We've claimed it and we've spoken to the people. We also have clarified to the people that those 4 individuals that were so-called ambassadors after the absence of the 12th Imam were liars. And the letters which they brought forward to the people were not true letters from the 12th Imam, that they were usurping the position of the true door to the 12th Imam. When Imam Mahdi disappeared, he did leave a representative, he did leave a messenger from him, but it was only one individual. And that individual was a man by the name of Muhammad ibn Nusayr.
Yes.
Okay? Muhammad ibn Nusayr was the true and only door to the 12th Imam after he went into an absence, and these four were liars.
Yeah.
We believe then that throughout the past 1,200 years, the 12th Imam remained alive, and that's a belief that the 12 Shia share with us, and there's no problem with that because, as you know, the Christians and the Muslims, they both believe that Jesus is still alive. Yeah. They believe also that the Muslims believe that Al-Khidr is still alive for the most part, right? And the people of the book also believe that certain prophets are alive as well, whether it be Ezra or Elijah or Enoch, depending on who it is that you are speaking to. And obviously the Quran stated that Noah also had a very long life. So the idea of a proof of God having an extended or long life is not an issue.
Yes.
Okay? So we believe that the 12th Imam, we know for a fact that the 12th Imam has been alive from that time, and that all throughout his absence, he has sent forward messengers from him to call the people to pledge allegiance to the 12th Imam and to the idea of the supremacy of God. And many of those messengers, they were successful in establishing the message and call on behalf of the 12th Imam. Many of them failed. A whole lot of them, the majority of them, were killed or martyred by the disbelieving people in their time, and their message was rejected, and their names were wiped out of the history books. And there's a portion of those messengers also that failed, just like the certain individuals failed, such as Balaam ibn Ba'ura and other than them, and they had their names erased from the books. And now we're in this day and age where the 12th Imam did make an appearance. He came out of his absence and he met with the loyal Ansar of his that are close to him, and he appointed the Mahdis and made them known to those Shia, and he sent them forward to proclaim on his behalf his message and to remind the people that they have a divine obligation to pledge allegiance to the 12th Imam. Yes. And so that is what I am doing. That is what I'm calling towards. I am telling people that if they don't go back and pledge allegiance to the divinely appointed king that God had named and appointed, who Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, then they're going to be destroyed in this world and the next.
Yes.
People ask, they say, okay, well, what should we do? I mean, we've been pledging allegiance to the 12th Imam for 1,200 years. I mean, what's the difference now? Like, how do we do that exactly? One of the things that Imam Al Mahdi alayhi salam is demanding of the people that they do is that they stop helping the tyrant in any way, shape, or form. And so Imam Al Mahdi has made it haram, impermissible, that any individual support an illegitimate imam, an illegitimate kingdom or president or prime minister or government, even with the stroke of a pen.
No.
So what does that mean? That means that step one that Imam Al Mahdi is calling towards is the disbelief in the tyrants. You have to declare yourself innocent from all other rulers and all other forms of government other than that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen and made obligatory. So to be a true follower, okay, because the Shia also, they say, we've been pledging allegiance for all these years and we have this state on behalf of Imam Mahdi. They're liars, because if they really were true Shia, then Imam Mahdi, according to their own narrations, would have already appeared. Because it's very clear that if Imam Mahdi only has 313 followers, and true Shia, and in other narrations, if he only has 10,000, so if he only has 313, he appears. If he only has 10,000 plus 313, he rises, right? This is according to them. So they have millions. They have hundreds of millions of Shia. They have a whole country, allegedly, right? Which is the country of Iran. And they have this militia, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. And they have all this influence in Syria. So if all of that was legitimate, if it really did represent the 12th Imam, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, it would have been an obligation that he appears. But the fact that he's not there means that they are illegitimate. And so the 12th Imam, the first step to being a true follower in him is that you have to declare yourself innocent from all of his enemies, and his enemies are all of the other tyrannical leaders and their governments that are responsible for the state of affairs that the world is in today. And the state of the affair of the world right now, it's incredibly scary. We have wars and rumors of wars that are taking place, right? We have a war in Russia and Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, a war between the so-called state of Israel, and between Palestine. You have a war that is taking place between, that right now really is about to pop off, where you just had on the news that the US and the UK have bombed the Houthis in Yemen. You have threats that are taking place between, from Israel, the United States, and the United Kingdom against Iran. You have threats from Iran and from Lebanon against those countries. You have crossfire and missiles that are being shot between Lebanon and between Israel. There are analysts and government agencies and people in the news. It's all talking about how there could be this wider Middle Eastern war that would take place. And people are saying if that did take place, that would be the Armageddon that is mentioned in the prophecies. And you have all of the, all the different groups of Christians and Muslims and Jews that are eagerly anticipating this event so that it can bring forward the promised Messiah, or the Mahdi, or the second coming of Christ. So in short, the first step of the message of Imam Al Mahdi is that you have to declare yourself innocent. That means you cannot work for any of them. You can't partake in their government systems. You cannot, even if it is if it's a government position that only requires you not to shoot a gun or to defend the state as a police officer or as an army soldier, if it just requires you to sign a piece of paper, to write something on a school board, you're not allowed to do so. Why? Because that is all empowering the system of the devil. It's empowering the government that was appointed by the devil. And it's eating money from the tyrant. And there's these narrations, AK, that are extremely scary, that state that anybody in the time of the Sufyani, who's a tyrant that exists, during the time of the appearance of Imam Al Mahdi, that anybody who even takes 1 dinar or 1 dirham from this tyrant, what happens? They'll be resurrected on the day of judgment inside of the belly of the Sufyani, right?
SubhanAllah.
So, the people that eat the money or take salaries from the Sufyani, they end up being resurrected with the Imam of their time, who is the Sufyani now, because he was paying them, and they end up being inside of his belly, and that's So I think I think we'll stop there, and inshallah, in the coming episodes, we're going to outline, all of the details that have to do with the 12th Imam and his message in this particular day and age. What does Imam Al Mahdi alayhi salam have to say about the events that are going on in the world? What is his message to mankind, and what is required about us? From us. And I know that a lot of people have also asked about the jurisprudence, which we have a lot to clarify about that. Yeah. What do we do in terms of our religion? How do we practice it? So we're going to go through that. We're going to focus on the seventh covenant now. We're going to focus on the 12th Imam and the second coming of Christ, Jesus Christ, who also is here today. Yes. So God bless you and thank you. There's an amazing conversation and amazing energy today.
Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.